Maybe I should have changed out of this sweater. It's a little warm. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video, we're going to be talking about my biggest disappointments and surprises of the year. Before we get into anything bookish, however, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what was one book you were shocked at how much you loved. Alright, so we are keeping the end of year wrap-up videos going. As I said, we're going to be starting out with my disappointments and then ending with my surprises. That way we can finish on a positive note. These books are ordered based on when I finished them chronologically throughout the year. So first up is Girl A by Abigail Dean. I think I read this back in February, and I actually picked it up for a book club as well as my Second Chances reading vlog. I had DNF'd this previously when I just was not in the mood for it. Unfortunately, it seems I should have left it DNF'd. I grabbed this from Book of the Month because the mystery seemed very reminiscent to the West family case from True Crime. Turns out it actually did have some basis there. However, this wasn't really a thriller. I suppose you could say there were some plot twists which took place, but I saw them all coming. Basically, we were following some children who were all saved from a house of horrors when they were kids, and now they were not revisiting the house, but I guess the main character was revisiting the crime and all of the events that led to their siblings having to be taken away. Very, very slow moving. Didn't really have much of a mystery, not to mention the chapters were insanely long, so pacing was terrible. In March, another book club read, which I had read and unfortunately did not enjoy, was Strange Beasts of China by 𝗖mě. I think I picked this up for Found in Translation book club. I was intrigued by it because the setup was a bestiary where each of the chapters was discussing a different beast from Chinese mythology. It did have that setup, but it was more like we were following a main character who would come across one of these beasts in her everyday life. Some sort of events would unfold where we would slowly start to learn more about them. Eventually, the main character finds some conspiracy by the government, and then we finally have a ending portion where the mythological beast has an explanation of their background. That was not what I went in for. That was not what I was interested in. I could not stay on the main character, and honestly, if I wasn't listening to this via audio, I probably would have DNF'd it. After that was a graphic novel, which I think was for my books on my TBR the longest, and that was The Secret Service by Mark Millar. Basically, this was the basis of the Kingsman movies, which I absolutely adore. Unfortunately, the graphic novel was not nearly as good. I definitely see the connection between the movie and the graphic novel, but all of the characters within it were incredibly two-dimensional. The villain was far less interesting or charismatic. Also, he mocked all of the disabled vets that worked for him, which I guess could be argued as a villainous thing, but honestly just seemed really unnecessary. Any reference to sex within it felt incredibly shoehorned in and awkward. The ending was incredibly rushed, so it wasn't really satisfying that we beat the villain. Overall, something I was really disappointed in was that this just lacked the comedy that the movies really excel in. So definitely one of the scenarios where the movie was better than the book. Those are rare, but it happened in this case. Next was one that I'm still pretty bummed about because this book was quite a slog to get through, but thankfully I was listening to the audiobook in the latter half, which definitely helped. Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. I do still have this on my shelves because I really like the cover, and I did really appreciate the past timeline that was taking place in this book. There are two different stories taking place at this school for girls. One is in the past where these two girls who were actually a couple started this club called the Plain Bad Heroines, and then both ended up dying in a freak accident. Then the other is in current time where these two celebrities are starting to film a movie set at the school. I actually started annotating this in the beginning, but towards the middle, I just started to notice that I wasn't really as invested in this story as I wanted to be. I enjoyed the past timeline a lot more. The current timeline honestly felt like filler. It seemed like we had so much background about these three different main characters in the current timeline that never really added to the story, so I didn't understand understand the necessity of it. The perspective changes happen quite often, and there are many different characters you are following throughout the story. While I do think they are pretty easy to distinguish, it didn't seem like every single perspective was really necessary. There is a little bit of a mystery that's taking place, but again, it felt like the current timeline wasn't really necessary because it didn't add anything to it. We only really find answers to this mystery that's taking place in the past. Why did I need to push through all of this info if none of it was really going to pertain to the main plot? Still not really sure about it. The atmosphere in this book is absolutely fantastic, and there are multiple different motifs which are running throughout that I think the author did a fantastic job of utilizing, but overall, it just was a letdown. Next is one that I am still so sad about. The Charlie Davidson series, which I started rereading last December and don't think I actually finished my reread until maybe last May. There were additional little novellas after the final book, which I had not read yet, and I picked those up while I was on vacation, one of which was The Graveyard Shift. I think this was 13.5. This one is following our main character Charlie's best friend, and he is actually helping to take care of her daughter. There's an additional side plot with his baby mama from previous in the series, and then finally trying to work on their relationship. I just was so let down by this. Overall, I hated the way Dorinda Jones handled Beep, Charlie's daughter, or that's not her real name, Elwyn. I hated how she handled Elwyn's story, Charlie's daughter. Also, the romance between Garrett and his baby mama. I hate calling her that, but I don't ever remember her name because she's a very passive character. It just wasn't really convincing, and I wasn't invested in it at all. I understood why the events of this book took place because Dorinda Jones is going to be making a new series following Elwyn, but I just did not like how this was handled at all. I would have preferred a giant time skip instead of this, honestly. And I'm still very upset about it. I think this is the lowest rating I've ever given one of Dorinda Jones's books, and it was 2.5 stars. I'm still very sad. Next up is Four Aunties and a Wedding by Jessie Q. Sutanto. I buddy read this with Nina at Books with Neen. I loved the first book in this duology, Dial A for Aunties. I thought it was so hilarious, entertaining. I really enjoyed the romance, but all of the things I liked in the first one just felt like they were amped up way too much in the second, not to mention the sort of mystery that's taking place. Nina and I both guessed the answer within like the first 5 chapters, so it felt like we were spending the rest of the book just waiting for the characters to put everything together. The sequel was really disappointing in comparison to the first book, and honestly, I just prefer to think of this as a standalone. Finally is the first book in a series that I was really hoping I was gonna love. A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. This is a Sherlock and Holmes retelling where we are actually following their descendant, and they both go to the same boarding school together, end up getting framed for a crime, and have to work together to try and prove their innocence. That sounds so fun. I was also sold this as an enemies to lovers romance between our two main characters. This is not that. They are strangers to kind of disliking each other, to friends, to very fast feelings that seem really one-sided. You know what's a big part of Sherlock Holmes stories? The mysteries. You know what this is supposed to be? A YA mystery, but there is no actual solving of said mystery at all. Instead, we are following our main character Jamie as he gasps dramatically every time Charlotte unveils some big reveal, which of course is shocking because there's been no evidence laid out to us to reach that conclusion. Not to mention the handling of rape and drug use in this just left a bad taste in my mouth. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be continuing this series. I'm still bummed about it, but at least I guess that's one series I don't need to continue. All right, so that is it for my disappointments, but now onto my surprises. Starting out was Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. I picked this up for a 24-hour readathon where my best friends chose my TBR, and my friend Allie picked this book, which is doubly surprising because usually anytime she recommends me a book, I tend to hate it. This is a sci-fi romance, and that's a genre I never really have been interested in. However, this book told me that I would love it, at least if Everina Maxwell is writing it. I fell in love with each of these main characters on their own, but the relationship between them is just absolutely fantastic. Add to that a very well-created sci-fi world, and then also a underlying political mystery. I had such a fun time with this book. I'm still shocked by it. I got an arc of the next book Everina Maxwell came out with and also really enjoyed it. So clearly I am going to have to continue checking out her work. Yes and I Love You by Ronnie Lauren. Ronnie Lauren may be a new favorite romance author off of this book. I can't say that definitively, seeing as how I haven't picked up any more of her work, but I do own the next two that will be happening next year. I promise myself. This has a ton of tropes in it. It's sort of friends to lovers with also a friends with benefits and then a love triangle. Also sort of a secret identity except from the love interest. I think it'd just be easier if I explained this book. We're following our main character Holland, who has this entertainment personality that she writes for anonymously, but her boss tells her they are going to turn this into a video segment. However, Holland has Tourette's and is incredibly self-conscious and anxious about her tics. She ends up enlisting the help of Jasper, who is a improv comedian and also runs a coffee shop in the same building that Holland offices out of. From there, they end up having a friends with benefits scenario, and then things grow. The romantic relationship between these two is tension-filled, so entertaining, steamy as hell. As I said, I really want to continue with this romance series and see if Ronnie Lauren is a new favorite author, but this was a fantastic start to it. This was particularly surprising because I never heard about this book, but I bought it since Ronnie Lauren is a local author to me. Another book that I was pretty shocked to enjoy was Passing by Nella Larson. That's because this is a classic, a modern classic, but a classic, and usually classics and I do not get along at all. I don't think I've given another classic higher than 3 stars, but this one came out to 5 stars. It was fantastic. I highly recommend listening to the audiobook. It is a quick read, but it is so good. This was an incredibly thought-provoking book with nuanced discussions around racism, sexism, colorism, growing up Black, handling of trauma. Every time I look back on it, I feel like I am just rethinking some of these topics. This is all doubly impressive given how short the book was, that it packed such a punch. But like I said, it had to be 5 stars, and I still can't believe that I gave a classic 5 stars. That's really saying something coming from me. Another book I gave 5 stars, which I actually wasn't even planning to read when I did, was Cackle by Rachel Harrison. I read this for the Halloween readathon in October when the other book I had for this prompt ended up not being available at my library anymore. I just recently bought this physically and it still fulfilled the prompt, so I decided to pick it up, especially after hearing Michelle at Michelle's library give it so much praise. And wow, I adored it. The vibes, immaculate. So freaking good. This is 100% a character-based story. We're really just exploring our main character as she tries to find herself without her boyfriend, find happiness on her own, and independence in being the person that she is. It was so good. It also has the witchy vibes going on around it. It's not terribly long. It's such a good read if that appeals to you. I definitely know some people wouldn't enjoy this since it is so character driven and atmosphere based, but if those two things sound up your alley, I highly recommend. And then finally, a recent read, which I was so incredibly happy that I enjoyed as much as I did, A Very Merry Bromance by 𝗖cie RH𝘁 I had really loved the first book in this series, Bromance Book Club, but unfortunately, as the series has progressed, my ratings have gone downhill. This one finally broke that streak with a 4.5 stars. So good, so fantastic. It gave me the investment that I had with the couple from the first book, alongside the familial drama that I was so engrossed in from the third. Pair those two together and then add wonderful found family vibes of the entire book club group that we've had grow from the beginning of the series. I was sold. I had such a fantastic time. All right, that is finally it. I feel like I've been talking forever. Thank you so much for coming to my channel today, guys. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me linked in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!